and we've got another guest for you right now. His name is Simon. I'm going to introduce him to you. Hello, Simon.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely fine. So I've been wandering around and saying to people, are you brave enough to come and be on our show? Some people go, no. And others say, they'll do it. And then others say, yes, I'll do it. So it's fine. So just tell me a little bit about you. So you've come to the gathering. What is it you're actually here to do?
So I'm an illustrator, and I've come to the gathering. I've got like a stand, and we produce a thing called the Word for Word Bible comic. So it's a graphic novel series which covers the words of the scripture, word for word, chapter and verse, without skipping anything out. And because we don't skip any of the difficult passages or bloody parts, these are aimed at adults and teenagers. And the other thing about them is that they're historically accurate. So it's all the real places, the weapons and armor from the time period, and that sort of things, like maps and all that stuff.
I'm more interested to come back and have another look because I didn't even have a chance to look properly. Where did this come from? And you said you're an illustrator. I'm presuming perhaps there's some illustrative background, and then you thought, why don't we try this? I mean, how did you come from where you've come from to doing this?
So before I did this, actually, I wasn't working as an illustrator. I did do a degree in graphic design, and basically I became a Christian in my 20s, and when I started to read the Bible, I was reading the NIV, and I was just sort of like, there's so much stuff in the Bible that people never cover in like films or even preachers. Somebody should do a comic or a film where they just don't cut any of the words out and just have it absolutely as it is. And I felt that the Lord was like, well, you do it then. So I started to sort of figure out if it would work and draw, improving my drawing skill. And basically, if you imagine like if you're trying to make an unabridged Lord of the Rings, you couldn't do it because there's just too much text. But with the Bible, it's very straightforward. Like, he said this, then they went there, then they healed this person, then he said this, then they went there. And it's actually very easy, and it works very well as a comic. You don't really need to, there's no editing required. And the way we work it is that the words that you don't really need, like he said and stuff like that, they are there, but they appear in between the panels.
Okay, so this is Bible comics for teenagers and adults, which is great. But it's telling the Bible. But I want to come back to what you just said. So you were thinking, this would be quite good. And you just felt God saying, why don't you do it? And I've met so many people around here who've got such a similar story of them saying, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm not classically trained, or I'm not doing this. I haven't got that gift. But then God says, yeah, but you've got this. And that's the bit I want to do. How have you found growing this? I mean, how long have you actually been doing this now?
So it's been an official company for 10 years, and that was this month, actually. Yeah, but I'd been doing it a few years before that. So I was looking at a sketchbook, and it was 2008 that I sort of was starting to do sketches of how will I draw it in different styles and things like that. So it's roughly around then that it is when I had that call, and I started to try and develop it. And actually I went to an event a little bit like the gathering, but just like a church event with all ages, and there was a t-shirt that said it's quite a classic thing, how's it go, God doesn't call the what is it, the like, but he doesn't call those that are skilled, he makes skilled those who have called or whatever, or equipped. I can't remember the thing, but it made me, sorry, I choked on the actual exact word that is required there, but he doesn't get people who are perfect and can already do things. He takes people and he makes them be able to do it. So so it's like, it's a different word than equip, but that is it basically. So that was and that was quite early on, and I had a couple of like prophetic words from and things like that, and I just sort of began, and and it's just grown from there. We did a Kickstarter, which is the big thing that kind of took it from just something I was like developing, and then and we got funding for the first book, and then I took it full time essentially.
Just I love it. It's fantastic to hear. And I can see the passion on your face, which you can't see on the radio, but I can. So I'm just stating it as a fact. The passion is great. So these comics, just help me out a little bit. So is this like a series that you go from different comics? Are there different, I suppose ranges is the wrong word, different series of comics? Are they telling different stories with different characters, or is it just one character that's kind of interwoven?
So it's just the books of the Bible. So there's one book for Judges, there's one book for Joshua, one book for Ruth. Those were the three that we did first, and then we did Mark's Gospel, for example. So we didn't sort of start in Genesis and go forwards, but there are actually 10 different books of the Bible now that you can get. It's the whole of that book, and it's got every word, and it's in the NIV translation, and in the corners you've got all like the verse references and stuff like that as well.
That's so cool. I remember when I was at a church in children's ministry, and we would say to the church leaders, right, when we're going to work with children, we want to give them the scripture. So whatever you're going to read in church, we're going to read out for the children. Oh, they'll get really bored. And I remember being quite challenging, saying, this is the Bible. No. So we faithfully read out the entire scripture. It might be a chapter, whatever they were doing in church, from the lexicon, which if you're not familiar with that, it's a Bible reading plan really for churches. So we would follow that. And I remember a parent came to me and said, my children a bit upset because we haven't got a real Bible. It's the phrase that she used. I said, I'm not quite sure what you mean here. Where's this? Is am I in trouble here? I said, no. We gave them a children's Bible, but it wasn't enough because they couldn't find the stories that you were giving them because we were reading straight out of Scripture. I said, what happened? They made us go out and buy a Bible for each of my children. So they got the whole Bible because all they had were these little picture Bibles, which is a great introduction, but it's not complete. And I guess that's where you're going to is complete.
Yeah, and that's right. So before, when I was developing it, but I hadn't published anything yet, there was another one that came along, and that's the Action Bible, and that has sold like over 1 million copies and stuff. And they produced it at that time, which was slightly frustrating. But even now, even though theirs is like the whole Bible all in one go, their aim, the actual book is aimed at like 8 to 14 is kind of what they would say. People can read whatever age, but it's very abridged, and and that's what they wanted. They wanted it to be the whole story in one go of the Bible, and it's a very thick book, but they skip through stuff, and so whereas in there, I think the Samson story is like 2 or 3 pages. In the word for word Bible comic, it's like 24 pages of like the story of Samson. So that's the difference. But actually, and what we found is that what I often tell people as an anecdote about how it's not necessarily great to cut down the scriptures for kids is if people read it and then they feel like, oh, I've read it now, I don't need to read it. That's not helpful. But also, if you take stuff out of the scripture, you actually change the meaning. So with Samson, when you cut out like the prostitutes, and then when he gets married and then he kills people out of hand for like insulting him and stuff, you take out all the bad bits of Samson, you end up with a story which is like, if you're good, God will bless you, because like if he's good, God will give him super strength. But the real story of Judges is, in spite of having a promise and then going around and systematically breaking all of the vows and promises that he's been given, God is faithful. And it's like God still blesses him, even though he screws up and even though he does everything wrong. And God still is able to use him and fulfill his prophetic purpose in spite of how terrible he is. So the point of Samson is, it's like the gospel. Even though you're sinful and will break your promises and be a terrible person, God can use you. Not if you're amazing, God will bless you. So actually you've reversed the meaning by just taking out all the bad stuff. And so that's why we make sure all the stuff's there and you get the full story, basically.
Superb. To be honest, I don't even know. Fantastic, because I get so fed up of people who just want to sanitize the gospel. When Mel Gibson did the whole thing of the Passion, and it's not pretty. Well, yes, it wasn't. And if we sanitize it too much, you start to lose some of the sacrifice that Jesus actually went through by making it feel nice and clean and all that sort of stuff. And do you know what? The Bible's good. It's a really good book, and we don't need to change it to make it okay to fit the nation, to fit people, because it's already good. So thank you for what you do. I'm going to have a proper look in a bit when I get some time. Where can people find you if this is something they want to look at?
Well, the best place to go is the website, which is wordforwordbiblecomic.com. From there, you can access our Facebook group, TikTok, newsletter, blog, all this stuff. We have blogs about all the history and the research that goes into it. But yeah, that's the place, wordforwordbiblecomic.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Simon, and coming across. I'm going to make a point in coming across before we finish, because I love people who are passionate about scripture and don't want to eradicate bits just because we don't like it. It's not very nice. We'll get rid of that. No. Leave it. God made it. It's good. What's that scripture? It's all good for teaching and rebuking. We don't need to cut it out. So, Simon, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your passion. And I think that's translated perfectly through radio. People might not be able to see you. I can, but I think your heart and your passion is just so amazing because it's coming through. So thank you for what you do. Just give us that website one more time.
So it's just wordforwordbiblecomic.com.
Go and take a look.